All right.
Yay!
Yeah, welcome to this episode. Thank you. The Vinay Kopp is here. He's one of the. Well, Vinay, I'm going to let you introduce yourself today. Vinay and I have known each other for a quite a long time, but Vinay, why don't you go ahead and tell us what you do day to day and maybe one of your passions.
Right on. Thanks for having me. I'm technical director at Hoof Themes. So I work very closely with Willem and all our customers, well, more specifically the developers who do the implementations, and try to make their life as easy and fun as possible. And one of my passions, oh boy, sleeping. Oh no, wait, that's not good.
Sleeping's
The
good.
dog, working out, doing stuff with the dog is fun. Man trailing and well, all kind of just fun stuff is great. Traveling with the family is lovely. I really enjoy writing code. That's passion. Still is. All kind of
Good.
stuff.
Yeah. I've had the opportunity to run with you and your dog in the mountains around Heidelberg, and it's such a great experience.
It is.
So today, I think let's talk a little bit about the Hoofa theme, and I think more, let's talk about some of the things that are happening with Magento open source and Mage-OS. I think that would be some really interesting topics that resonate. Let's start with Mage-OS and talk a little about open source. I know there was Adobe Developers Live conference on last Friday, and that would have been February 11th. What was your takeaways from that?
Yeah. Okay. For me, it was a very nice talk. I enjoyed it. Not just the talk. I watched a couple of, and I didn't watch everything. I just watched a couple of the talks and presentations and the roundtable about Magento open source and such. I liked it. The vibe within Adobe, I am enjoying that. It's a lot better than it used to be a couple of years ago, and they're communicating a lot more, which helps me understand what's happening. So that's good. Even though you just asked me before we started recording, actually, the keynote, right, was a little misleading in parts. So a number of people reached out to me afterwards and asked me about some of the statements that were made. And at least from my understanding, as part of the Magento Open Source Task Force, where we talked extensively, hours about these topics, maybe the information given was a little incomplete. So I understand why people might have gotten the wrong impression there. So one of the statements, for example, was that community open source is handed over completely to the community. Right? And that's not true. What will happen, at least according to the current plans and expressed intent of Adobe, is that Magento open source as it is today will stay there as Magento open source LTS, so long-term support, which has 5 years or whatever support versions, very stable, absolute focus on security and stability because it's the basis of their commercial offerings. And what they will be handing over to the community is a new distribution called STS, short-term support. So this will not be officially supported on Adobe Cloud. Probably it will be possible to install it and use it, even though it just won't be the official distribution for one. And that, in fact, will be owned by the community. It's not quite clear who that will be. Will it be the Magento Association or how that will look like? But Adobe said they only will have an advisory role, no veto power or anything. So the community can, in fact, steer the way it should go, which is lovely. It's pretty much exactly what we wanted to achieve with Mage-OS. And it's very exciting. So I was very surprised when Adobe announced it. So like a 180 turn there. So great. A lot of things probably were being discussed internally before they announced this. So that's one thing. It's not that open source is just handed over to the community and Adobe is, okay, we'll got rid of it. In fact, it's going to be a whole new distribution that's in the hands of the community, while the existing distributions will exist. And security features and new releases will flow back into STS. And at the same time, any features that are developed in STS and that are maybe then after a year or so battle proven turn out to not cause big disruption and actually have tangible benefits for merchants, they can be cherry-picked back into LTS when there's time for another release there. So these two versions are definitely not independent of each other. And there's a vested interest on both sides to stay compatible to some degree, right? Even though I'm really looking forward to being able to innovate again as part of the Magento core. And at least it's hard now to speak about Magento STS because I've got a pretty clear picture about Mage-OS, how that should be, what it's for, the value it will provide to merchants, to developers, to Adobe, to the ecosystem. It's maybe a bit premature trying to apply the same thoughts to the STS distribution because that's not just Mage-OS. But probably there'll be some similarities. So I would be very excited to be able to help maybe steer some aspects of that into the direction that I personally find important. For example, make it more accessible for developers and performance improvements, of course, etc. So many things there to do, to think about, to have fun with. So that's one part of it. The other part that you mentioned before we started recording again was, is Adobe going complete SaaS? Is like Adobe Commerce going completely SaaS? I think what that statement was intended to mean was that all new features that Adobe will be releasing for Adobe Commerce will be SaaS offerings, just like they have for the last couple of years. So everything around Sensei, so Adobe Analytics, product recommendations, search, I think those are the services they provide. So far, they are SaaS offerings, but they only are usable with Adobe Commerce because of the PHP stack they're built around and integrated into. Now, in theory, they could be integrated into any commercial e-commerce offering, right? Not just Magento. These are SaaS offerings after all. But Adobe Commerce will be built on the PHP stack. So it's not like it's completely SaaS. No, for many years to come is the official statement. So nobody knows for how long. Pretty long is my expectation, right? It will be pretty much what we've got right now. We have the stable PHP core and then SaaS offerings being built on top of this. And this is actually great because nobody likes breaking upgrades. It's just doing work without getting any benefit out of it. So having a stable core is awesome for everybody. Developers have much more fun building new stuff. Merchants don't want to pay without getting something in return for development work and development hours. So this idea that we were proposing for Magento open source from the beginning, for Mage-OS that is, and now also I think hopefully will be adopted for the STS release, is that the same approach is followed. So any new features are developed extensions, so to speak, right? It doesn't have to be SaaS offerings, but they won't be part of the core, so to speak. But external extensions, which then can be added in. And the only difference is such a service or feature could be running inside of the same PHP process. So that would be the in-process customization, as we developers know and love it. Or it could be a SaaS offering like Adobe offers it. Now, in case of Adobe, those could be customized through the thing called Adobe I/O, former Firefly, etc. But that's just for the SaaS offerings. So all the existing customizability of Magento still exists. And that's great because we have the whole module ecosystem and developer ecosystem around that. And that's here to stay. So maybe that clarifies things a bit.
I want to just break this down a little bit now because we went through a lot of things, and I did not have an opportunity to see the live broadcast. But the LTS and STS, I think, obviously has confused a lot of people. When I read a few notes from somebody that sent me, here's what's happening, they said, Magento's going open source. Magento's going SaaS was the first statement, I think, and that Magento Association is going to take over the Magento open source. These are some big statements, and I was like, wow, where did this all come from? And I started doing some searching, and I couldn't find anything about it. So I think your clarification has made it much easier to understand. And then Willem did go through the LTS and STS with me, and that also makes perfect sense. I do feel like maybe they did dump a whole lot in a keynote on the community, and I'm a little bit perturbed that it's going to take 3 weeks for this recording to come back out. I feel like maybe there was some misinterpretations of this news, and it hasn't spread widely. I just want to go back to open source, and let's talk directly about STS, LTS. And so it's clear right now, Magento is going to control the open source core of Magento. Adobe is going to control the open source core of Magento. It's going to be called LTS, long-term support. And another entity at some point is going to get control over the fork, which is going to be this short-term support, which is going to be more of the innovative space that's going to happen. Would that be a good...
We'll be able to adopt newer PHP versions much quicker, include improvements that have a high priority for the community, better caching, better session handling. For Adobe, they didn't have a high priority because of maybe focus on Adobe Commerce Cloud or stability. There's much more room to maneuver there for innovations.
I think some of the things you've talked about, and one of the things they announced earlier was they're going to decouple all the core features, all the third-party modules like PayPal and .digital. All those are going to get removed from the core, and we're going to end up with just Magento, which I think is a great idea in that part. Again, just to explain to the listeners, LTS is going to be a version of Magento that is a core version that's going to reside as an open source version for everybody to use. It's not going away. It is still going to be the core of Adobe Commerce. And Adobe Commerce, theoretically, what they're saying is they're not going to bundle a lot of new functions into the core of Magento, but rather depend on third parties, and more likely from Adobe anyways, SaaS services to attach to it. That a good, easy way to say it? Okay.
Absolutely.
If we then talk just briefly about the SaaS, because I heard a lot of people say, Magento's going SaaS, right? I don't know how that could have been misinterpreted. I guess I do know how it could have gotten misinterpreted. It sounds like all the new features are going to be SaaS, but the core of Magento, as we know it, there's no plans at the moment to make it go SaaS. And it would really have to be a brand new refactoring of Magento or Adobe Commerce before it could possibly go completely SaaS.
So, complete speculation here, but my guess is something like that will come at one point in time, maybe, but everybody within Adobe says many years to come, whatever that means, right? Until that will be ready. So until then, they will be reliant and dependent on the PHP version for many years to come. And also, even after this new product finally has been realized, this complete SaaS commerce offering, they have a lot of existing customers on Magento as we currently know it. And they will still need to be supported. So that will take another, how it is. Software never dies. And we still have Magento 1 and what's called OS Commerce hanging around. Still, we'll still have Magento 2 sites on PHP in 10 years, officially supported by Adobe.
Yeah, and I think the realization, too, of this SaaS offering, it will be something that competes in the enterprise space when it's ready, and I'm guessing 5 years from now it'll be ready. Ideally, it would be cool if they had 3 versions They had a SaaS, they had a on-prem, and they had an open source. With the open source always underlying core that's pushing forward all the core features that have made Magento. And there's no reason why a SaaS version couldn't be PHP.
No, absolutely.
I think Kineo has a SaaS version, that's PHP. Shopware has a SaaS version, that's PHP. Let's not speculate too much, but I think just to help people understand what was put out there on Friday, the peripherals of Magento as we see them, or as Adobe Commerce, sorry, as we see them are going to be SaaS. And I guess the good news for that is that anybody who has open source would now have options to bring in some of the enterprise SaaS features that Adobe Commerce is offering,
If
theoretically.
Adobe decides to offer them to open source merchants running on open source, sure. So there's no technical reason not to. Only business. Hey, we want to have an exclusive for commerce, which I don't know. But there are always other offerings too. Companies like Nosto offering product recommendations and other search, Tweetwise, etc. So there are many options, competitors, so to speak, of the Adobe offerings, which are, of course, open to any open source merchant too.
And I think all of these, a lot of these extension companies, Shipper HQ is a great example of who decided that they were going to go SaaS early on. They've had big success in doing that. And I don't think, because some of that the processing is done outside of Magento, doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to stop you from making some customizations that you want around that. If we think about how Magento works, there is an extension that usually talks to the SaaS provider, and then the SaaS provider does its work and it comes back, right? At a minimum, you can just connect with RESTful or have some basic connections where it would do everything. But generally, we'd have some extension you would install. That extension would do the communications. If there's any rules that we want to build, we could build into that extension that's outside of the SaaS. And I guess we would call that microservices, right? If we're truly SaaS, you'd have to have all these different microservices that are residing outside, and you'd have to manage all those things.
I don't know how micro these services are, but services, yeah. And that's exactly how the Adobe SaaS offerings integrate into Magento Commerce too. Exactly, just like you said. So no difference.
Yeah, and I think too, and I guess there are going to be Adobe extensions that you would install, and I'm thinking specifically of the new Adobe Payments, which is an extension you install, but the bulk of the work is done outside of Adobe Commerce. And it is open to open source clients. Interesting that a lot of the extension updates, because they said the extension is partially written in React, the extension updates can be pushed to the extension from Adobe.
Yeah. Then it has to be hosted somewhere, like the JavaScript code needs to be pulled in from some server environment controlled Adobe in that case. So they just update the file on the server, which then gets loaded into the browser. That's the only way to do that, because they are unable to update the code running on a server, unless, of course, they own the server too, like with a cloud. So that would be another story. But yeah, everybody's has the same tools at their disposal as technological tools. It doesn't matter whether it's Adobe, whether it's a third-party SaaS provider, whether it's an in-house team. Adobe obviously has a bit of power in terms of manpower. They can put behind some things and unify a lot of offerings, and there certainly is a benefit in that. But they still have to build stuff with the same technology everybody else uses.
So I think some of the things I'm hearing is that you're excited, or let's call it bullish, about this LTS STS model, and it's going to be a good path forward for the years to come. At least in the short term, at least 5 years, in the long term, 10 years, right?
Yeah, your guess about the time frame is as good as mine. That said, my idea is probably something similar. Yeah, I think probably not too far off. But again, I have no idea. I don't know. No additional information. Now, because Adobe has a big corporation, they've got legal, they've got a ton of teams, a lot of different departments that have to be involved, product ownership, marketing, APIs, strategy, leadership, whatever that means. So many people, so many aspects. It'll take some time. It won't be here tomorrow. I have no clue how long it'll take. It does seem like Adobe is interested in making that happen as quickly as possible. So I have no impression of anybody stalling this. And this is, I'm talking here from being part of this Magento open source task force, right? So we meet every 2 weeks and get to talk with other members of the community who are interested in the future of open source, and also 5 or 6 people from Adobe who are there all the time. So we talk about different aspects of this and try to find the right best path forward. And that's what this is based on. So it'll take some time. And in the meanwhile, we from the Magento Open Source Community Alliance will continue to build out the Mage-OS distributions, and everything that we're doing there, I believe, will feed directly into the STS version, because we're learning a lot building this, and all that knowledge will serve being able to have a community-run Magento version, even with the guidance from Adobe. Doesn't hurt learning things on your own too, so we are not dependent on Adobe. And that's the one thing I keep repeating, and that's one of my main motivations there. I think it's pretty important to be independent, to be able to make our own decisions without having to wait for others. And so far, everything that we've done has greatly, just only good things have come from it. Look at what we're getting. We're getting an STS version. We have a lot more communication with Adobe. The whole vibe is shifting around Magento. We have a lot more clarity about where Magento is headed, etc. So I believe if we could continue to do this, good things will come.
Yeah, so I want to shift now. Okay, I want to close out this Mage-OS thing. If you're a listener and you're not technical, don't worry. Magento's around. I want to just dive one small technical talk, but really quick. So I did see, I think he's a Magento master, and I should know his name, but he talked about integrating the UCT, the upgrade compatibility tool, into the build of every build of Magento. I think that's exciting, and I think more people should use this upgrade compatibility tool, as well as just the testing framework. I can't express more that developers need to be using some of the tools that are out there. Have you used the upgrade compatibility UCT tool at all?
Not in anger. I've just used it on the code base that I work on, but because I'm working with a product company, Hoof, it's not like we have our own sites. Like, I'm not a merchant, in effect. I work for merchants. So it's slightly different. But yeah, it's good. This upgrade compatibility tool is helpful. I wouldn't consider it a goal to be 100% green, because that severely limits what can be done. But it's super useful in that it shows where to pay extra attention during upgrades. Chances are, depending on how the code is written, it'll still work. But it just gives an indication of where a given site is.
Good. All right, so let's move on to the Magento Association. So you're part of the open source task force, right? Is that what it's called now, the open source task force? I'm on the membership committee, so I can share my news from our meeting yesterday, and you can share your news. How's that? You share your news first. What's the news on the open source task force?
The news on the open source task force is that we're trying to figure out how to make this STS version happen as good as possible. First, Adobe has to figure some stuff out internally. But once it's ripened a little bit, we want everybody on this task force wants a joint effort there, realizing that. In fact, a lot of the work will be up to the community. And as all things open source, the people who show up and do the work, they're the one who counts. So it doesn't matter about how groups of people and so on should look. It's just whoever's there and does it. And yeah, I hope many more people will turn up. But same with this open source task group. At the beginning, we were a lot more people, and after some time, some people just stopped going. Maybe they thought nothing would come out of it, or don't have time, or life happens. I realize, we live in a world where things do happen that might make Magento seem less important. So I understand. But we need the people who are willing to show up and do the work. And we want to encourage people to join and help. So that's what we talked about.
One thing I've seen from this task force is the lack of representation from people outside Europe.
Wait, so you're talking about Mage-OS, I think. So the task force is like a committee of the Magento Association?
Yeah.
Yes. So Mage-OS, yes, absolutely, you're right. The US was underrepresented, and many other parts of the world as well.
Okay.
And the reason for that, and you guessed it correctly, you talked about that before, it's just we wanted to move fast, and moving fast is easier with a smaller group.
Yeah.
Now we're at a point, we almost have a release ready. And once that's ready, we will open up the group and we'll open up the GitHub repository and invite people to participate. It's super important more people participate. But then we have something. We're not just people talking about stuff. Then we've got something. Yeah, that's super exciting. And I'm looking forward to many people joining, from the US and other parts. We need help.
So just to clarify, and I sorry to add some confusion, the Magento Open Source Task Force is 5 people from Adobe and 5 community members that are working on how are they going to make this all work. The open source version and what's going to happen. The Mage-OS, the Mosca, is a group of people that are actually working on making it work. Is that a good way to describe it?
Yes, started earlier. This whole STS version only happened because of what the open letter that this Community Alliance European-centric group published. And yeah, so that's how it started, but it's not going to stay that way.
Okay.
Yeah, it's confusing. From the outside, I wouldn't have a clue what's going on. We have Magento Association, we have Adobe, we have Magento Open Source. Now we have Magento Open Source LTS and STS. And then we have Mage-OS, multiple distributions. And we have repositories. Like, too much. Who can understand all that stuff? But it'll become clearer over time. Yeah, so hopefully everything will just merge together over time.
Yeah. All right. So from the membership side, then, the Magento Association is going to have a paid model. And at first, what you'll get from paying is you'll have the right to vote for the board. And the board voting is out now. I think it's starting. And I think that there has been quite a shift in the community, and people are looking for new board members. I think they're looking for March 1st to start. It's going to be on Patreon. That they're looking to March 1st to start the member drive to get people to join the Magento Association. Mm-hmm. And it'll be, I won't say any prices yet because nothing has been confirmed, but there should be some affordability in there as well. It'll be very similar to what Drupal's doing. And the pricing the pricing to join will be lower than what Drupal has. And the first benefit is that you'll be able to vote for the board for Magento Association. So that's my big news. Yeah.
Good news. Thank you. Okay, that's very cool.
Yeah, and I think one of the things is that people have complained that the Adobe side has not been transparent and communicative, and the Magento Association side has been slow in communicating. So I think what we're seeing is each of these committees is happening, and I'm taking some responsibility on telling the world what's happening in our. I wrote a blog post about our meeting in January that should be out pretty soon now. I'm going to write a blog post about our meeting for February, and honestly, too, it just the time to get that blog post approved is quite a long stretch. It's not like you just record it and get it live right away. There's a lot of red tape, and I'm learning that. And I think part of it is that the community has to be okay with some of this red tape. And I think what you've said earlier about Mosca and how you wanted to make it happen faster, that I think that's a great decision to make that work. Because if you do open it up to the whole community, now you have multiple people who want to do different things, and you can never get anything done.
Do you remember last September, Meet Magento Poland? The discussions that were happening there about paid membership and everything. So it's cool to see this come to fruition. Very nice. Also, back then, Mattes from Typo 3, he said, okay, if you start to open things up, what will happen is a lot of people will attend the first 2 meetings, and after that, it will just be back to a fraction. And those are the important ones. So don't spend too much time making everything too transparent and easy, because too much effort there isn't worth it. And back then, it would be nice if we just had hundreds of people working overtime, getting everything done. We just, I think that's just not how it's going to work. He has a lot of experience in that area, so.
Yeah, no, I saw some of those. I saw some of his tweets, or I think they were tweets or LinkedIn. I think they were tweets. Anyways, I just want to reassure people from the Magento Association side. And by the way, go to magentoassociation.org/join and join today. That things are happening. Things are happening on the open source task force. We'll have some great news on the events committee. Things are happening on the events side. There's going to be more Meet Magentos coming. There's things happening from the membership side. And I'm just going to continue to push that Magento Association has a place on their website to tell us what each of these committees is doing. I do feel like it's not, like we're working towards transparency, but it would be great to even publish the meeting notes as a transcript. And I don't know why not, right? There's nothing happening in these meetings that can't be. We don't sign an NDA and we don't say, no, you can't say this to anybody. So why can't we at least talk about it? I think if we don't do that, then we also end up with speculation like we did from last Friday's conference, where the keynote is saying Magento's going SaaS. And everybody starts getting confused.
Yeah. It would be helpful to know, to be able to refer back to, okay, what's actually going on if needed. Probably most people won't watch that because we're all busy and it's just more meetings. Oh yes, I want to watch more meetings.
Yeah. Well, I think from a news standpoint, even from a transcript standpoint, if you Google, like right after I saw those notes, I started Googling Magento going open source and Adobe Commerce open source and Adobe Commerce all SaaS, and nothing's out there. There's nothing. There's no news about it. So then I'm like, well, maybe there's a misinterpretation of what the person said.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to have to do a second episode because we're running out of time for your Hoof talk, but I think let's briefly dive into Hoof, and I think that we should do a second episode specifically on the reason why we should implore people to have faster websites. I think that should be the topic, right? If you happen to be on Magento, Hoof is a great option, and we've just launched our first client on the Hoof theme. It's taken us a while, a live one. So we're excited about it, and we're seeing great things. And every meeting I'm in, and this shouldn't be a Hoofa commercial, but it's going to be. Every meeting I'm in, I pitch Hoofa and say that there's no better way to improve their ROI on a website than to increase the site speed, right? So tell us, maybe give us some updates. We have 5-10 minutes now.
Yeah,
give us some updates on Hoofa and tell us what's happening.
So much is happening. All the things, all the good stuff is happening. In particular, things that I've been working on a lot. Extension compatibility. We now have a number of extension vendors join Hoover who are committed to supporting all their extensions, making them compatible. So they work out of the box on Hoover installs. We have some early adopters like Red Champs and Jajuma with great extensions. So all of their extensions are compatible. And now we are seeing more larger, major extension vendors join. Like we just announced a tech partnership with Mage-OS, and WebCool is coming. They have a lot of compatible extensions. So that's great seeing that these extension vendors see the benefit in making their extensions compatible. So we have more than 100 compatible extensions now. Some are listed in the Hoover compatibility tracker. Some are compatible out of the box. So no need to install additional extensions, just provided by the vendor directly. And that's been great. So I've been recording videos on how to make these compatibility modules. I've been writing a lot of documentations. We've made the documentations public, which has been requested a lot, so people can inform themselves before actually starting out purchasing a license. So that's done now at docshoover.io. And that's what I'm trying to do, basically, making the life of extension developers more pleasant and making life easier for merchants, because all the extensions they want to work with, they just work. So that's good. A lot of extension vendors have been following the lead of Magento, creating their extensions in a way that they were built for Luma. So building a ton of small JavaScript files. And that's exactly the opposite of how we work in Hoover. But there's a reason for it, right? Any Google page metric just is, it just doesn't pay having this require.js-based front end. So having small inline JavaScript is great. Google loves it. Customers love it. It's super fast. But yeah, we have to adjust the way we write these modules, and that's what I try to educate developers about.
That's great. Yeah. So I've been pitching the fact that Hoof is going to improve your web vital scores. It would be great, and I'll give you an idea that I had. It would be great if on the Hoof site, on your Hoof.io site, you have some kind of check, right? With a theoretical, if you switched your theme, what your score could be. So like you punch in your URL, it does a quick calculation, which it's an open API for the vital. All you do is show that performance score. Like for example, I just did a test on yesterday on a client, and it came back as a 17 on their performance score. And I have a script on my computer that I run, so I just put in Lighthouse URL. Boom, it gives me a little report, and I can share it right with the client. It would be cool to say, and that you would say, here's your score, 17. Theoretically, if you know that it's going to improve it just by removing all that JavaScript stuff, it'll improve it by 50 or 70%, whatever it is. So it'd go to 65 or something, knowing that they still have a lot more work to do, but you can give them some scores. I can equate this to, there's some marathons that you can do that are downhill marathons, and they always say, if your marathon was a 4-hour marathon at Chicago, if you do this marathon, you're going to do a 3.
Okay.
You can extrapolate the idea of performance gains from a benchmark that you would get in general. And of course, you would say this is not really going to happen. This is all theoretical.
It's
but
theoretical.
You will see an improvement, and an improvement could be as much as this.
Absolutely, yeah.
It'd be a good selling tool.
On average, if we take the customers where we have numbers who went from Luma to Hoover, the median amount they improved by is X, and then we could apply that there, maybe. Something like that. We could. It would be tricky if people then would try to take that as a promise. It didn't work. You still are using this super expensive live chat or whatever that really ruins all the page metrics, no matter what page you set up underneath use. It depends, as always. But yeah, I like the idea of being able to just immediately present some kind of results there.
Yeah. And then I think some benchmarks, some key benchmarks, and having some success stories on your site. You already have some success stories, but actually rolling them out with big, huge numbers and graphics like some marketing directors like to see and CEOs like to see. They like to see a 56% improvement in load time or 120% improvement in, or 1,000%. You know what I mean? Like those are the things that people like to see. I didn't want to make this a marketing session, but
thanks for this free consultation. I'm very much with you. We're working on a new site. We're just missing a bit of the content. It looks great. I can't wait till it's finally live. So there'll be more stuff there. It's coming. It's almost there. I really would like to have somebody on board who focuses on producing that kind of content. Would be really helpful. Yeah. You got a job.
Good. So let's close out today. I think that there is some effort to get more content from Mage-OS. I think we had a meeting earlier and getting the community to be involved and helping to develop some of that content. So why don't you just talk briefly about what you're working on there?
Sure. The background is Adobe removed the domain magento.com and redirected all traffic to their Adobe Commerce, adobe.com landing page. And I was pretty disappointed about it. I think that's a super bad idea. It's bad for everybody who built their business around Magento and Magento open source and the name Magento. And it's just harsh. I don't know. It's not good. So I think the decision was made, and that was also confirmed from speaking to people inside of Adobe, by people who don't understand and who don't have the full picture. And that just happens with a large company like Adobe. So hopefully, maybe something will change. I have no idea. But fact is, at the moment, if somebody wants to get informed about Magento open source, if they don't know it already, what do? There's no magento.com. They just go to a page on Adobe's site selling them to Adobe Commerce, which is just explaining how that's built on top of open source is beyond what most people want to know. So we need something there because it's possible to create wildly successful websites on Magento open source. So many people are doing great. And that's why we decided, the Mage-OS group, to put up content around Magento open source targeted at merchants, for merchants, so they're able to inform themselves. So description, what it is, comparisons to Adobe Commerce, for example, case studies, maybe insights into specific features that's offered there. I don't know, for example, page building, because that's the latest feature that got rolled over from Commerce to open source. So things like that interest merchants who might consider it. So that should come out as fast as possible. And hopefully somebody else like the Magento Association or Adobe will also do something, but experience has shown they move slower. So we're trying to get something done. And as soon as something else is there, if that's better, I think everybody would be happy to contribute the content there too. So it's just important to get the content out there because so many people's livelihood is built around Magento and not Adobe.
Yeah, I agree. So just closing out today, a couple of key points, and I just want to key in on Magento open source. And I think that we have to continually talk to the leadership at Adobe and let them know how important those customers are and what a great funnel they are to getting to Adobe Commerce. So everybody on Magento open source is a great candidate for Adobe Commerce, and open source isn't necessarily right for Adobe Commerce because there's certain things that clients don't need, but everybody could be right for Adobe or for Magento open source. And if leadership understands, the more they invest in the open source side of it, the more potential clients they have that will move to Adobe Commerce, the right type of clients Adobe wants. And I know that Adobe wants people that fit into their suite, right? They want people that would maybe get AEM, that would get Adobe Target, get Adobe Analytics. They'd like to have people that fit into that the Adobe Experience Suite, which includes Adobe Commerce. This is a great vehicle for Adobe to get clients upstream into where they would like to see them. And I also would agree that decoupling some of these things that were some of the third-party modules that were part of Core will make upgrades easier and make the experience that some Magento open source users have had where upgrades have been a little bit more difficult and they're costly, right? So slimming down the core, making it really great, and making the core easily upgradable is going to help the open source users to have a larger ROI on their investment.
Yes.
The key here, though, is we just need to keep pounding in that Adobe can't forget open source, and it's not a competition to Adobe Commerce. The way Adobe Commerce is positioning themselves are for big business. There's absolutely no focus on medium and small business. So why don't they continue to focus on it by letting them use open source?
There's some great folks inside of Adobe. Eric Airway, Nicole Cornelson, Mignalo. Come on. Christian Pakia, I think it is. Not quite sure how to pronounce their names, apologies. But they are great. They're really working hard on increasing awareness inside of Adobe. And we can see that's happening through the results that we're seeing now. So they're also on the open source task force. So it's not just us having to talk to Adobe leadership. We have to do that and continue to do that. But there also are good folks inside of Adobe.
Yeah, good. Vinay, we're going to have to schedule another just performance interview and talk specifically about how you make your website faster. And that will, of course, lead into... But thank you for today. It's been a very enjoyable conversation. I'm going to get the transcript out on this one right away so people can read it as well. And let's do another one where you can... We should do an episode when we're all ready to display how easy it is to install Mage-OS. I think that's a fantastic initiative.
Yeah, let's do that one again.
All right, thanks so much.
Okay, thank you too, Brent. Yeah, take care. Thanks for having me. Bye-bye.